Good afternoon and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's the Monday show on a Tuesday with me, Andrew Musgrove, and him, Mark Crothers. Thank you very much for joining us. We're here to look back on Newcastle United's 3-2 defeat on Monday night to Liverpool and why it might be the best defeat I've seen in my 30 years supporting Newcastle United, as daft as that sounds. There is, of course, the search for a striker to chat about, which is even more important now that Anthony Gordon will be missing through suspension. Plus, we'll look at the significance of the chairman being in town and whether Newcastle United's annual injury crisis has already landed. Huge thanks to NORD VPN, as always, for sponsoring the podcast. If you want a discount on your monthly plan, hit the link in our podcast description box and sign up. One subscription can be used across 10 devices, and there's no risk with NORD's 30-day money-back guarantee. Stay safe online, protect all your details, and support the podcast at the same time. Mark, welcome back. How are we keeping? You had a good weekend?
I have had a busy weekend, starting Friday night with the under-21s playing Chelsea, and right the way through to today, because I think last night just felt like an absolute whirlwind for everyone, didn't it? So I'm still kind of in recovery mode, I think.
Well, I hope your bank holiday weekend picked up after Friday night in the 21s.
It certainly did, yeah. A difficult night for the under-21s, getting beat comfortably against a very, very strong Chelsea side. I'd like to say there were positives. But beyond the first 15 minutes where Newcastle were the better side, there wasn't a lot. So, yeah, difficult night, and it's on to Birmingham City on Friday night.
Fixtures coming fast for the under-21s. I was in sunny Cleethorpes over the weekend.
Very nice.
Hopped in the car on Monday to get back for last night's game, and I'm really glad I did. I know Newcastle United lost, but I have come into this morning, the studio, on a real high. I'm really happy with their performance, with the heart and the commitment and the desire that they put in on Monday, really playing for the badge and the supporters, and just a definition, I think, of this wonderful football club under Eddie Howe. And it is that message of unity, apart from one man, of course. That being said, Newcastle did lose 3-2 to Liverpool. A lot to pick out, a lot to talk about. But Mark, just some of your initial feelings to what you saw.
I think firstly, we know football is a results business. That's what managers and players, live by, really. And last night, as you say, Newcastle did lose the game, but there were a lot more positives, I think, in the performance, and not just, I know we're going to talk about not just Bruno Guimaraes, who was, as we've said, I think probably his best performance in a black and white shirt, but I looked around the side and I just thought there were a lot of really good performances. Tino Livramento, I thought, was excellent again. Kept Mo Salah fairly quiet, ironically, until he swapped to his favoured right back position. I thought Dan Burn and Fabian Shaw looked again solid. Although obviously there's injury issues there now, so there's going to be changes. But I think more than anything, you mentioned unity, and I think that's what Newcastle need to show more than ever now with what's going on. We're in the final days of the transfer window. The Alexander Isak situation is still ongoing. And the message that came across from everyone in St. James's Park last night, from supporters to players to managers to coaches to chairman, was a one of unity, and we're in this together. And I think early in the season, although you can't bypass results, you look at a little bit beyond that, and the positive performance, I feel a lot more confident now going forwards than I did maybe, I don't know, a week ago.
Oh, certainly so. I agree with everything you've said there. I think the time of the campaign to obviously lose a game is never good. And in that fashion, of course, it will hurt. But the positives totally outweigh the negatives. And Gary says here, if it was the best performance, probably in defeat, but not the best feeling after the game. Players deserve credit for an amazing performance, and definitely puts us in good stead for the future. I think that's a really good point. We're, of course, gutted with the defeat. Nobody wants to lose, especially when you've clawed yourself back into it and arguably maybe should be in front. But I am taking the positives and running with them. And I came away thinking, you know what? Newcastle United are going to be okay, especially if they get that striker in. And that's what that's what changes the whole narrative, really, is getting that replacement for Callum Wilson. We'll forget about Alexander Isak for the moment, but if they can get a goal scorer in, they're going to be fine.
Yeah, I mean, you looked last night and, Langer put a number of balls in the box that I think a natural out-and-out striker probably gets on the end of. There was certainly one, I think it was in the second half, that flashed right across goal, and you just think, that's where an out-and-out striker with that natural instinct would be. So there is that frustration, but yeah, I think if you look at the performance overall, particularly after the red card, which, again, I know we'll go on to it, but it's a red card. There's no point, I don't think, debating that. If that's on a Newcastle player, you'd be up in arms if it wasn't given. So, but I just looked at the performance, and I looked at the way Bruno led. I looked at the way Newcastle hassled and harried, and at times controlled possession against 11 men and dominated territory, and put real pressure onto Liverpool, and the league champions, the comfortable league champions last season. I just think you can't do anything but be positive about the performance, and I think great credit has to go to the supporters, because they set, and particularly War Flags, because they set the tone last night with, it would have been easy to go in on Alexander Isak and to send a really strong message to him personally in quite a personal way, but they didn't. They did it more about the focus is no one's bigger than this football club. We're all in this together, no matter what he thinks. And I just think that they set the tone for what was a really, really good atmosphere, strong atmosphere, positive atmosphere. And that needs to be carried on throughout the next 9 months if we are going to build on what is a historic season last time out.
Certainly so. Newcastle United dominant in the first half, and Liverpool couldn't handle their intensity or physicality. The Magpies were strong, they were pacey, and were the better side. As me and Mark have said there, the best chance arguably fell to Anthony Gordon, who headed over from Harvey Barnes' cross. And you mentioned it there, there were a few other examples of Elanga getting the ball in, or Livramento or Harvey Barnes. And I think pretty much everybody would have went away from that game thinking, if Strand Larsen's in that team, that ends up in the back of the net. And Newcastle probably go into the break with at least a goal, if not maybe 2 or 3.
So I think that Gordon header's a far more difficult chance than people are making out. I think it's not as straightforward. It's difficult. He's jumped pretty high as it is. To get over the ball and direct it goalwards would have taken some leap, put it that way. And I'm not sure other strikers who are at the club or potential ones that will come in would have done much better. But yeah, I think it is just instinct. I think it's a striker's instinct. I think Anthony Gordon, although he's done a job there, at times he's obviously done it for England under 21s as well. I don't think you can rely on Anthony Gordon to be that 15, 20 goal a season striker Newcastle need. I don't even know if Strand Larsen will be that. I think he would be a good signing at a certain price. But that's a completely different argument altogether, isn't it? But I'm just not sure he would be that 15, 20 goal a season striker that they do need. As you said, that he's going to be the replacement for Callum Wilson. So then what happens? And that's the $150 million question, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. And we'll speak about Alexander Isak and Strand Larsen later in the show. Newcastle United, like against Aston Villa, didn't make their dominance pay, and Liverpool took advantage of that. Ryan Gravenberch getting a goal with 10 minutes of the first half remaining. Liverpool's real first sight of goal, and it takes a deflection to wrong foot, Nick Pope. Now, if you've been overly critical, and I don't really want to be because the performance as a whole was absolutely superb, but you might say that Gravenberch was afforded too much time and space to get a shot off, and Newcastle United didn't play it at the whistle because a player went down and everyone seemed to stop, and that allowed Gravenberch to then pick his shot at goal. But that's just football, I guess.
Yeah, I think you've got to give credit to the player as well, to Gravenberch, because I thought he did brilliantly to sort of set himself. And then obviously I think Bruno's blocked him off, hasn't he? So he's turned inside Bruno again and then got the shot away. Now, it would have been easy to get under it in a rush, but I just think it's great technique. It's a great finish. And yeah, I mean, you look at Pope, he's obviously anticipating a shot across goal. So he's been slightly wrong-footed by that. It's come through bodies, taking a little nick off Fabian Shaw. I think it's just a good finish. Sometimes I know we were talking about it before we came on air. Sometimes you want to jump to the negative, but I think in this time you've just got to say it's a good finish.
And then it was all about the reaction, and sadly, the reaction came from Anthony Gordon, who saw red. As you said, Mark, no complaints. It was a bad challenge, and VAR for once did what it was supposed to do and come to the right conclusion. Even being a goal down, I felt with 11 men that Newcastle would win that game. Gordon had arguably been the best player on the pitch up until that point. But you can't have any complaints, can you? It was just a silly, silly challenge. And at the end of the day, it has cost Newcastle United.
It has. And I think when you look at it, I could kind of sense it coming, because he was closing down really sort of aggressively when he didn't have to in that little sort of 30-second spell. There was no need to go and press Van Dijk. And I know you want to set the tone and you want to keep the tempo up and all that sort of stuff. I just felt it was unnecessary. There was no danger. Van Dijk wasn't going to ping a pass out from nowhere. Yes, put him under pressure, but there was no need to go in like that. But again, I understand why he's done it, because he wanted to set the tone. But what he's done is he's got in that quickly and then tried to pull out, and it's just too late. So if he started that slide a little bit earlier, he probably comes around Van Dijk and takes the ball, but instead he's gone straight down the back of his Achilles or calf, and you see the damage that he's done, the marks that he made. It's just over enthusiasm and a little bit of naivety. And I know obviously he's been on social media this morning, hasn't he, and put out an apology, which you can tell is from the heart. He genuinely means it.
I'll read it out now. He says, I want to sincerely apologize to my teammates and the fans. My intentions were pure. I was just trying to create energy in the game and mistying the tackle. I also want to apologize to Virgil. I would never intend to tackle someone like this on purpose. We spoke about it after, and he knows that. More importantly, I'm so proud of the time I spent on the pitch and how we played tonight. The atmosphere from you all is what makes St James Park so special. I love everything we stand for as a club, and no more than right now. I'll be back and better, the same as every other setback I've ever faced. See you soon. And that really is my message to fans. If you are kind of looking for someone to blame and you do come across Anthony Gordon, I would say, don't do it, because he was the best player on the pitch. It was a silly, silly mistake, but he will be back and fighting for this football club. He's played in a position that he doesn't really want to play in. It's not where he's at his best, but he's shown up. We spoke about it last week. He had this kind of same saga with Liverpool last summer, and he handled it so much better. So he gives everything for this football club when he's on the pitch. One silly mistake shouldn't define, his season, his start of the season. We'll soon forget it when he starts banging the goals in 4 games' time.
The simple fact is, Newcastle United are a better side with Anthony Gordon in it. And yes, he didn't have his greatest season last season. We know the reasons behind that, but he's come through it now. He's had a good pre-season. This is a minor setback, but he'll be back in 3 games once he's done served his ban. And I've got no doubt he'll be one of Newcastle United's key players in every competition this season.
I think the biggest frustration now that he is missing is that I kind of got the feeling he was building up to something, against Villa.
I agree.
He was okay. First off against Liverpool, he was superb. And who knows what might have happened against Leeds United. Even if they brought in a striker, say in time for Saturday, what you've now got is a massive void on that left wing in that competition for Harvey Barnes, who it's only 2 games in, but hasn't really done too much. And you could see a striker coming in and Gordon slotting back onto that left wing, but Eddie Howe doesn't have that option. No. He has no one now to push Barnes for the next 3 games. And just overall, whether he's up front on the left wing, you just have lost arguably maybe your 3rd, 4th best player in the squad.
Yeah, I'd agree, and seems to have a growing influence in and around the squad as well. I think he's been at the club 2.5, 3 years now, and you look at him and he looks like a Newcastle United player now. He fits into what Eddie Howe wants. I do feel like, despite how naive it looked last night, like he's matured as a player and a person. We shouldn't forget he was still very young and hadn't had loads of Premier League football before he came to Newcastle. So I think we are seeing a player develop who is now an England international as well under Eddie Howe. And I'll not go back on what I said last week, but I do feel as if he is one of the ones that Eddie Howe and Jason Tindall and the coaching staff have improved. So yeah, once he comes back, I fully expect him to take over left side of that front 3 and hopefully at least one striker will be through the door.
And Gary says, with the adrenaline pumping, there was no way it was a red watching live. Watching again the replays, saw that it was definitely a red. Roger says, I thought it was a red watching live. Clattered mistake or not. JJ says, Gordon will indeed be back. He's done this before and he will do it again. It isn't just one silly mistake. So JJ is not best pleased with Anthony Gordon, but the rest of the comments live on YouTube are offering Gordon that hand of support. Paul says, no blame for Gordon. Things like this can happen. No malice in it. He was class, led the press like champ. It then came to, oh my God, how is the second half going to go? Obviously, we don't know what was said within the dressing room at halftime, but you can imagine, keep it tight, don't concede another goal, especially not early on. And then within a minute of the restart, Ekitike gets a goal, and it comes from Newcastle's own doing, really. And there's no way they should be conceding a goal within the first minute or 2 from their own kickoff. It's just no excuse for that. People might say, well, obviously they've gone in, the game plans had to change and they've come out and they're not quite warmed up to it yet. But I think if you're Eddie Howe, you'll be mightily unimpressed at the way you concede that goal. You know, it's a long ball forward, it's come back, and you see Tonali chasing Ekitike, and he very nearly gets there, but then the frustration is that him and Bruno both go towards the ball and no one follows Ekitike, who finally gets a shot off. I mean, it's a superb finish.
It is a great finish.
Low down to the corner, might have taken a nick off the post. But I think if you're Eddie Howe and you're watching these replays, you'll be circling either Tonali and Bruno and saying, well, one of you have to then follow Ekitike and not just go for the ball, which is obviously one of the first things you're taught at a very young age. Don't follow the ball, follow the man. But as it was, Newcastle didn't, and that second goal goes in.
And I think I'm right in saying on the footage after the goal, you look at Eddie Howe and straight away he's looking at the pitch side monitor that they have by the dugout. So clearly he knew, probably had an inkling of what happened, was looking for that confirmation. And I've got no doubt those messages will be relayed to two very experienced players who will learn from it. Again, the finish is, it's just such a good finish. It's such a clean hit that you can't look at Pope or anyone else. It's just that little build-up play, as you say. It's more frustrating than anything. But when you have a setback like that, you look for what's the response. And I think we can say now, despite the result, Newcastle got an overwhelmingly positive response to it.
Yeah, because you sit there as Ekitike is celebrating, you think, oh, not him, anyone but him as well, given the narrative with Newcastle and their interest in him. And then you think, what's going to happen next? Damage limitation. Is it going to be a cricket score? You know, we said the reaction to them coming out for the second half was going to be key, and that's then totally gone the wrong way. Then it's about the reaction to the second goal. But there was just something that stirred. It's like someone just flicked on a switch, and all of a sudden, Newcastle United just found that extra yard, found that energy and that pace and that desire and want, whipped up by the crowd, led by Bruno Guimaraes, of course, who's man of the match. It was just wonderful to see. And Bruno gets that header just before the hour mark. And I actually think that goal sums up Bruno Guimaraes to an absolute T. He has stretched his neck as far as he can to get there beyond the defender to head home. He just wanted it more. And it was just, I think, the perfect definition of Bruno's performance, a proper leader's performance. Walked tightrope a few times because he was already on a yellow, but that passion and that desire and that love for the club, it's just absolutely unrivaled. And I think, he's everything a Newcastle United captain should be, fully committed to the badge. It's rather ironic, isn't it, as well, Mark, given how Alexander Isak has acted. You couldn't have two different characters right now.
I don't mind saying that when Eddie Howe opted to take the captaincy off Kieran Trippier and give it to Bruno Guimaraes, I was a little bit sceptical.
Yeah, me too.
And I think there'll be a lot of Newcastle fans who would be in the same boat. However, his actions, his presence, his attitude, his commitment, he's everything you would want. He embodies what any football club would want from a captain, not just Newcastle United. And I just look at him last night and I just think, if you put a brick wall in front of him last night, he would have run through it. Simple as that. If it meant getting a header in on goal, if it meant getting a tackle, he's an inspirational character. Not with just his style of play, but also the way he carries himself on the pitch. Yes, he's niggly. He plays on the edge, but you know what? And I'm not saying he is one of the best players in the world, but the best players in the world, they all play on the edge. It's all that fine line, and that's what we saw from Bruno last night. But I think he reined it in eventually. In terms of, he was probably heading towards a second yellow at one point, but he got himself under control. And I think we saw, in certainly recent years, one of the best performances from Newcastle United midfielder we've seen. The goal he scored, the only thing I can compare it to is the first goal in the second half of the 4-4 with Arsenal, when that belief that the unexpected could happen sort of coursed around St. James's Park. And then all of a sudden, the same thing with last night. You just felt this. You know what? This is more than doable now, and the players seemed to then join in with that. And there was just this collective belief that let's go and have a go. Let's go and have a real go. And I've always said this about St. James's. It's got this power to bring something unexpected from nowhere. The PSG game was a good example of it. The atmosphere that night, the Arsenal second half, as I said, we could sit here and name loads of games, and I think the fans set the tone. There was Arsenal in the first season. Howe was in charge that night. You just get that feeling that the supporters have a bigger part to play than some people probably suspect. I think, and Bruno is kind of the one that can inspire that reaction before it comes. So yeah, I just think he's been one of the most influential signings made at Newcastle in a long, long time. And I hope he stays for as long as he wants to stay, because we talk about Isak's contract or possible contract and all this. Give it to Bruno, because I think he's the most important player in that squad right now.
Oh, that's a claim. I do think it was the best performance I've seen from Bruno in black and white. And there's been a few which people might point to. But for me, last night, I'd never seen him play that way. We've always seen that passion. We always see, as you say, he's on the edge. But there was just something else about him, the way he was controlling the game, the way he was controlling the ball, his strength. And obviously we had a few of the typical Bruno moments where he goes down and thinks he's won a foul, Liverpool break on the counter. We've got the kind of jumping in at the referee's face or pointing at a play. I mean, there was a moment where Alisson runs over, and I have to say, I think Alisson might be the nicest guy in football, to be quite honest with you. Obviously, goes down, helps Fabian Schär, but he runs over and he just says, just calm yourself down, because you're going to get a second yellow, and he needs that, and it's that's maybe the one thing which does worry me slightly, because usually it's the captain who needs to be telling players to calm down, but Bruno is at the head of the queue, as you say, running through brick walls. So it's down to the likes of Trippier and Co, and Trippier did push him away.
I think there was a bit at the end as well with Gravenberch, wasn't there, when Gravenberch seemed to be, how do I put it, giving it the big one to Bruno, and Bruno reacted, and then I think a few players got in between them, but Bruno looked furious. But again, I think it just shows how much he cares. Look, this is a guy with absolutely no attachment whatsoever to Newcastle United before he came to the club. I think supporters probably didn't know a lot about him before they signed him in that transformative January. But you look at him now, and I can't imagine Newcastle United side without a minute. I think sometimes because he's hit such a high standard and such a consistent basis, we recognise more when he drops his levels more than when he maintains them, if that makes sense. So I think I look at him and I just think he's kind of what you need in midfielder, because he can do a little bit of everything. I still don't know what his best position is, or his best role is in midfield, but it's probably somewhere like last night where you just let him just go and do what he wants and sets the tone. I thought Sandro Tonali had a good game last night as well, in that sort of, you can't really call him a holding midfielder because that's not what he does, but he's certainly the deeper of the three. And I thought Joe Linton did what Joe Linton. I think he was very lucky to avoid a booking in the first 60 seconds. But I just thought, again, Joe Linton's just an absolute powerhouse. He's going to be a miss if and when it is confirmed.
I thought that the midfield three did really well. I think they controlled large parts of the game. They complemented each other really, really well. Joe Linton brings that physicality. Tonali's the engine, and then Bruno's kind of the one who delivers that pass. And you're right, they're going to be an absolute huge miss. And Eddie Howe on the injuries said, I don't know with Joe Linton and Sandro, it doesn't look good when a player comes off, especially because both looked in a little bit of pain. So Joe Linton, I mean, he was in tears. He was just crying his eyes out as he left the pitch, which we haven't seen that kind of level of emotion from him. So it must have been bad. And I thought he had a really good game, and he didn't want to come off. He wanted to run around and crash into a few more Liverpool players. So for him to come off, it must have been really, really serious. And Sandro Tonali, you could see as soon as he got up from that challenge from Ekitike, I mean, I call it a challenge. It was a coward's challenge because there was absolutely no need for it whatsoever. And both Jordan and Bruno were absolutely fuming at Ekitike for it. It was a really cowardly move from him, but you could see he just wasn't right. And then they've obviously tried to patch his shoulder up, but for the 10 minutes he remained on the pitch, he was literally running with his arm tucked into his chest, which, I mean, he must have been doing that through gritted teeth. It didn't look good at all. We wait updates on whether it's dislocated or whether it's just a bit of a bang. I think Eddie Howe said he didn't think it was dislocated. He wasn't quite sure what it was, but he was clearly in pain, and that he couldn't actually lift his arm up, which, I mean, if he's missing for any amount of time, it's a huge blow. And that's obviously accelerated by the fact we think, and obviously we haven't heard anything after last night, that Joe Linton will be missing for at least a few games with whatever injury he picked up. So the midfield, it's a brilliant midfield, but it's decimated now, isn't it?
It is, but sometimes, when things like this happen, people step up. And I think you look at it now, I thought when Ramsey came on, he was excellent. I thought he really gave energy, gave drive.
Pace.
And pace, absolutely, yeah. And I think I talk about him every time I'm on here, don't I? But
Was he slipping year 20?
I thought Lewis Miley was really calm and composed when he came on. So obviously, if things go the way they are, as we expect with injury news, your midfield's kind of picked itself. You're probably looking at Bruno having to play a slightly deeper role at Leeds, or maybe Lewis Miley will be trusted with that role.
I think Lewis can do it, and that was the analysis I came away with last night as well. You had flashes of brilliance from Ramsey. That pace, I think, really stood out for me. And as you said, Miley was just composed on the ball, and I would trust him to have that role of Tonali, allow Ramsey obviously to fill the gap that Joelinton will leave. And I don't see, especially against a side like Leeds, with all due respect, obviously you're going to be at Ellen Road and what have you, and that adds its own element. But I think with Bruno, given how he performed against Liverpool, I would just leave Bruno to be Bruno in the position or whatever role Eddie Howe wants to put on him. Let him just continue in what he did on Monday night. Put Miley, trust him in that centre spot, because I think he'll do a job.
No, I know he can. I've seen it before, in first team and 21s and youth team. You can 100% do that role in front of the back four. The thing you want though is kind of a replica of a Tonali, where yes, he's doing that role in front of the back four, but he also has a bit of license to drive, which we know Lewis Miley can do. We've seen it, and I think I said it the last two times I've been on. It's a massive season for Lewis Miley, and this could be the opportunity that he needs to get into the side, have a chance if it is a prolonged opportunity in the first team. We haven't mentioned Joe Willock, which is quite funny, because you would think he would come into contention, but obviously he's still making his way back from injury. But I do think on Saturday at Leeds, you're probably looking at it being the midfield's kind of picked itself now. The one thing going down there, a little bit like Liverpool last night, Newcastle are going to have to deal with what's going to be a really raucous atmosphere. They had a good start against Everton at Elland Road. They're a big, powerful team again. When we did the season preview, I spoke about the fact that they're one I wanted to watch because of the power they've got in that team. All the signings, or most of the signings, 6'3+. So there's going to be a physical aspect to the game that Newcastle have to live up to. So it's down to that midfield again to set the tone. I wonder if there will be a change in defence as well, so we'll see how that works. I would imagine Malik Thiaw will come in to play alongside Dan Burn. And the little bits he had to do last night looked all right. He had one little slip, but it's still very early days for him. So there's some big calls to make. But yeah, in midfield, I 100% trust Ramsey and Miley to do the job alongside Bruno.
People have been calling for Miley to get more game time. Obviously, we wouldn't want it to come in the way that it has done. I mean, look, Tonali might be perfectly fine, but let's say he's not and Miley does get the chance. Can he take it? Because there's enough people saying he needs that chance, enough people saying he's got that ability. You've watched him more than most. But when that chance comes your way, you have to take it. So can he?
I've not seen any reason as to think why he couldn't. I think you look at his attitude. I think physically he's grown in the last couple of years in terms of, looks like he's put a bit of weight on in terms of muscle. I think when he has played, he's done very well. I know it's been kind of bit parts, but when he's been had starts, I know it's pre-season, but Espanyol, I thought he was the best player on the pitch by quite some distance. I just think you're right, this is his chance. And I think this is where he can maybe solidify his place as a genuine first-team player and in terms of first choice at Newcastle. Now, I'm not saying if he goes in there for, 5 games and does unbelievably well, that long-term he's going to keep Sandro Tonali out the side, but he's certainly going to come into that equation where you go, right, we've got 3 games in a week. We'll rest Sandro, we'll put Lewis Miley in. That's his challenge now. Can he really make Eddie Howe think? Because we know Eddie rates him because he always talks about him in a positive way. This is a massive chance, and it can really set the tone for what could be a really, really good career in the first team at Newcastle.
Fingers crossed he takes the opportunity if indeed it does come his way. Just following on from Bruno's goal, it really got the crowd going. It seemed to go up another level. And Liverpool, and I actually thought this was how you would sum up Liverpool throughout the game. They just looked like they could not handle any part of Newcastle United on or off the pitch. Look, disjointed, straight passes. They weren't the Liverpool of last season, in my opinion. But Newcastle United deserve credit. Eddie Howe deserves credit because it was a team performance, that was organised, well worked, well drilled, and again built on that passion that the club is famous for, really, that we all know and all join in with. And Liverpool were hanging on at times, and then obviously then the goal comes from Willisula. And what a moment for the lads. I've always backed them, ladies and gents. I mean, the fan club has been in short supply of sign-ups, but maybe not now. But I have to say, actually, on Asula, I think we saw the best and worst of them. I think we saw why people think there's a player there. Clearly, there's something there. But I also think we saw a big reason to why Eddie Howe doesn't quite trust him at this moment in time. We saw a goal, which I was a little harsh upon, speaking it full time, actually. It was actually a really nice finish.
It was a good
You
finish.
can see that he's really given his all to get there in front of the defender and before the goalkeeper. So over the moon for him to get that. But what we also saw was him give away needless fouls when Newcastle were heading up the right end of the pitch. And then after 10 minutes, and I say this, carrying quite a bit of timber, ladies and gents. I mean, if you watch my Great North Run time in a couple of weeks, you'll see what I mean. He looked way off the pace after being on that pitch for 10 minutes. And that's slightly concerning.
So I'm going to credit one of my friends, Kevin Turner here, who made the comparison between him and Lamona Lualawa, who had a kind of similar role under Bobby Robson, where he came off the bench. You would want that energy late on. You'd want all that excitement and unpredictability. And I think that's what his role is now. I don't think he's ready to start. He may have to on Saturday. I don't know. I don't think he will, but he may have to. But I think we are seeing a player, and again, in terms of the Premier League, he's still very much in the learning process. He's still learning his way under Eddie Howe. But there will come a time when he has to step up and he has to become the player we hope he can become. The one thing I would say, we're not talking about a kid here. He's not 18-year-old. I think he's 22.
Yeah.
So he should be starting to show signs now. Last night's a big step forward, that first Premier League goal of the season, second Premier League goal for the club. You're right. He did sort of, I think there were times when you've got to be, specifically when you're down to 10 men, you've got to be clever with your running. You've got to be clever with your pressing. You've got to do it at the right time, in the right moments. And there was times last night where I think he tried too hard.
He looked at times like he had weights around his shoulders. Like he looked like he just couldn't keep up with the press.
But I think that's because he was trying too much.
Okay.
Instead of managing his energy, because we knew Newcastle were going to come under pressure eventually. There was always going to be a reaction from Liverpool because they're a good side. And I just think it's that game management's a horrible term, isn't it? That you hear these days more than anything else. But I think there was just maybe a little bit of that, just manage himself throughout the final moments and press at the right times and conserve his energy to really hammer home what was a bit of an advantage Newcastle had going into injury time.
Because I think throughout the entirety of the game as well, we saw that Liverpool, when you got right in their faces at the back line, again, they couldn't handle it. Didn't like turning back on themselves, but they didn't want to go back to the goalkeeper. And the press worked, I thought, really well, especially in the first half. But then, as tends to happen with Liverpool at Newcastle United and in the Premier League, they go and get the winner. 16-year-old Rio gets it, and Newcastle, to be fair, dead on their feet at this time. Mark,
They were.
The space was there to be exploited, and Liverpool did that. Some people would say it's poor game management. You get the equaliser, and then do you shut up shop and you sit back and you absorb? And if you can get forward or you can just whack the ball into touch, then you do so. Newcastle United, though, I felt were, in the ascendancy. They could smell 3 points. They wanted it, and I've got no complaints sitting here 12 hours later. I'm not feeling like I did after the AC Milan game in the Champions League, where I think they should have stepped back and just protected what they had. Today I'm sitting here thinking, do you know what? I'm all for going for 3 points, because Newcastle United at that point, after getting the equaliser, with a better side, Liverpool were rattled, and Newcastle had a chance to get 3 points out of, 3 deserved points, actually. And it's just unfortunate that Liverpool managed to exploit the tiredness that came out of Newcastle's effort.
I think sometimes you've got to do what feels right at the time, and clearly with the atmosphere going the way it was, with the flow of the match going the way it was, going for 3 points was the right thing. Everything felt as if it was going in Newcastle's direction. To be fair to Liverpool, they kept their cool heads, which you'd expect from champions. Once they got through the little shaky spell that they had, I say a little shaky spell, it was a big shaky spell, wasn't it? And the goal kind of summed it up a little bit. It was a really well worked goal from them. I thought the step over from Szoboszlai was just a wonderful bit of play. And it's a great finish, to be fair to the young lad. I mean, we could probably name players that probably would have taken a touch and tried to like place it past the goalkeeper, but it's 16-year-old to take it on first time in that sort of moment. And I know we're here to talk about Newcastle, but that's it looks a simple finish. It's not. It's a great finish, and I just think it maybe summed up how and why Liverpool are where they are, because they kept cool heads, they kept calm minds in that that really high intensity bit of play. Yeah, it's disappointing not to come away with anything, but again, I think any Newcastle United fan would look back on last night, one with frustration, admittedly, but more so with great pride from top to bottom.
100%, and obviously gutting to lose in such a fashion that they did, but so proud of the effort of the lads, especially going down to 10 men. I mean, things really could have fallen apart, and instead, I left the ground thinking Newcastle United have been hard done by, and Liverpool have actually been very fortunate to go away with 3 points. So proud of the effort and the commitment, the organisation, and just the unity that was throughout on the pitch, the terraces, in the boardroom. And again, I just left feeling positive and optimistic. And yes, we lost the game, but in many ways, it didn't feel like that. And what I felt was, and what I saw was foundations to build on to have a really good season. Yes, on the condition that they get that striker, but I wasn't frustrated. I wasn't angry at the players. All I could do was praise them.
Look, it's not so long ago we would have sat here and said, remember, was it Swansea away where there was we don't demand a team that wins, we demand a team that tries. And I think Newcastle United last night summed up everything of that. They gave everything, and there's not one player came off that pitch without putting 100% in. I thought everyone, the subs who came on, did a great job. It was just everything you could want from a performance except the win. Now, if they'd held on for a draw, then I think we can say it would have been an unbelievable result. If they got the win, we'll be talking about it for years. Simple as that. And I just think you've got to take the positives into what's a little tricky run of form now, and we'll see how it goes.
You mentioned Nick Pope earlier in the show, and his position has come in for quite a lot of question on all 3 goals. I've seen people really go in on him, and part of me wonders, is he going to be the new scapegoat, so to speak? But the reality is, you do have Aaron Ramsdale signed. You know, he hasn't come to sit on the bench. Look, I don't think Nick Pope was particularly at fault for any of the goals. Maybe he could have been a bit more to his right for one of them, or what have you. But I'm not laying the blame at his door. Are you?
I don't think any goalkeeper coach would look at Nick Pope last night and say that he was at fault for any of those goals. I think what you'll probably see is that Eddie Howe will retain faith with Nick Pope for the vast majority of games coming up. However, at one point there will be a Carabao Cup game comes in where I think you'll probably see Ramsdale start, and then it's down to him to really show, you know, can I make an impact? Can I put in that performance and give Eddie Howe something to really think about? So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. At the moment, I just think Pope's got the shirt, and until he does something majorly wrong, I think Ramsdale will have to be patient.
Really interesting to see Ramsdale go on the pitch at half time and you know, give kind of every Newcastle United player a handshake, kind of a cuddle. You know, that's leadership. That's going to be really important going into the new season. You had Kieran Trippier acting like a third manager on the touchline alongside Jason Tyndall and Eddie Howe, and he had to be told to sit down quite a few times, which I found rather amusing, and that just maybe adds fuel to the fire about why people want him to stay on in a coaching capacity when he does indeed call time on his career. The other thing people have been speaking about is the performance of the referee, Simon Hooper, who, it has to be said, had an absolute nightmare. And look, I'm not one who usually goes in on referees. It's a tough job. I wouldn't want to do it. You know, you can block out the noise to a certain degree, but it's difficult, and you know, they're human. They will make mistakes. But there is a catalogue of errors from Simon Hooper last night. I mean, you've got Fabian Schär lying on the floor with a massive cut to his head. How on earth that wasn't stopped? What was the linesman doing? What was the fourth official doing? Unbelievable. You got Konate on Barnes, which actually ended up Bruno getting a yellow card. I mean, live, I thought that was at least a sending off, but he was already on a yellow, wasn't he? So he would have gone off.
You would imagine, because Barnes isn't on goal it's denial of a goal scoring opportunity, so that would be a straight red. At very least, it's a yellow. I think there was a few arguments, or second yellow. I think there's a few people saying it was shoulder to shoulder, but it's not because it's pushing the back.
Yeah, there's two arms on the back.
So, yeah, to me, that was the biggest blunder of the night, I think. The Shaw one, from a player welfare point of view, is the most concerning. And you'd be a little bit worried if someone at PGMOL isn't having a word with the officials last night. Because it looked really serious when it first happened. And he's lying flat on the ground. My concern was when you saw Alisson's reaction, where you're going like, look how concerned he is. And the play's still going on at the other end of the pitch. Now, that is, it's a lack of care from the officials. There's been a lot of talk in recent years about head injuries and the impact of concussions, and a lot of what Alan Shearer has been at the forefront of, and Chris Sutton, I think, as well, who was on co-commentary last night, wasn't he? Talking about concussions and the long-term impact of those. And to see the officials, all four of them, by the way, not paying any attention to what we knew was a bad injury, I think that really... it was negligent more than anything else.
Yeah, 100%. And you got Gravenberg on Bruno, which I don't think people would be highlighting as much if other challenges, not just in that game, but in previous games, had been flagged as a dangerous challenge. For me, there was just total lack of consistency from Hooper.
So mine on the Gravenberg one, when I first saw it, I thought it looked a very strong yellow, borderline red. When I looked, my big thing with it is that it wasn't sent to VAR for another look at least, and it stayed as a yellow. And I'm not saying it should have been a red, but I'm quite surprised it wasn't looked at again, because it looked like it was a scissor challenge. He's gone through him from either side, hasn't he? But yeah, I mean, it's difficult from referees because it's a toughest job in the game. It really is, and I try at any level to not criticize referees too much. But all you can ask from them is absolute consistency, and I don't think we got that last night. I will throw in as well, I think Joe Linton should have been booked in the very first minute, and I think that was another one where if it got looked at again, it was a poor challenge. It was a high challenge, just to put in a bit of balance here. But I think, yeah, both sides will be frustrated with the referee, and rightly so. But the Shaw one and the Canate on Barnes were the two that really, really kind of irritated me.
I'm just sick of sitting here pretty much every single week talking about how bad referees are. Okay, VAR worked actually the way it should have done in that game last night, but over the weekend, there's been instances where it just hasn't worked to its full potential, and that's because of the people using it. The level of refereeing it's absolutely dire, and it needs to improve, because Newcastle United, would have had the chance to go on to win that game had the examples we've given, gone their way, and unfortunately they didn't. We had the owners on the pitch with the chairman, Jamie Rubin, on the pitches as well. Significance of the chairman flying in, obviously with everything that's going on, reports suggest that someone from Newcastle's boardroom has spoken to Alexander Isak at his home before the game. Feels like this is going to come to an end one way or the other. I mean, really intrigued to hear and to read what was said within those four walls. But I mean, just the significance of, I guess, the chairman coming to this game. I think for me, it shows a real sign of intent. I think many people have said, that they're losing interest. Well, he's got on a plane and he's arrived in Newcastle. I think to do it at this moment with all that off-field distraction shows you that they are committed. And if this gets sorted, this Isak saga gets sorted in the next 24, 48 hours, and they get a striker in, you go, well, there's the significance.
Yeah, it is. And it feels like when the chairman turns up, something tends to happen if it is in the transfer window. So I think there will be progress made. Obviously, there was talk about the bid for Strand Larsen ahead of the game, wasn't it? It was rejected pretty swiftly by Wolves, but then there's been reports suggesting that Newcastle are preparing a second bid that they expect will be accepted. Now Wolves are trying to bring in a striker from La Liga, from Getafe, so that's pretty close apparently. So yeah, I think we will see things move. I mean, let's be honest, they have to move. The Newcastle can't end this transfer window without at least one striker in. In an ideal world, two, but they've taken so long to bring in one that bringing two in the space of under a week now is going to be a very tough challenge. But yeah, I think the chairman being around he's the one who will make the calls at the end of the day. We know that. That's how it works. The line of power at Newcastle goes where nothing happens without PIF having their say and giving the ultimate green light for stuff. So having in them can only be a positive, and I just hope that things happen quickly. You want a striker in ASAP to at least be in the squad on Saturday.
I would love them to get Strand Larson in before Saturday. And I think when you read the Wolves manager's quotes, it was kind of more, we don't want to lose him, but it wasn't, he's not for sale sort of thing. I think there's a fine line there. And obviously Wolves have got a history of selling their best players. Unfortunately, that's just the way of the game. I think this one might get done. And they're talking though £75 million is their asking price. That is far too high. But I also think Newcastle United are in a really difficult position where every club knows they need a striker to replace Callum Wilson, let alone Alexander Isak. We have got, how many days have we got? 5-6 days left of the window.
Next Monday, yeah.
If you're going after someone like Strand Larson, who is so vital to Wolves staying in the Premier League, they're going to want big money, because have they got enough time to replace him? That's questionable. So everything is working against Newcastle United, but the bottom line is that they can't finish the transfer window without replacing Callum Wilson. Whether it's 60 million for Jan Wissa, whether it's 75 million for Strand Larson, I mean, these are astronomical numbers. But I'm at the stage where you go, well, okay, look, in an ideal world, do I want to pay 75 million for Strand Larson? No, but we need a striker. Newcastle need to replace Callum Wilson. And if it means getting to the Champions League, and that extra 25, 30 million that you maybe paid on what he's actually worth, it's worthwhile, isn't it? That's the gamble that they're going to have to run with. And that's the position that they're in.
Yeah, they've got themselves into a really difficult, I mean, themselves as blame can be put elsewhere. I think we know where that can be. But yeah, it's a really tough final week of the window. They may have to pay above and beyond what they want to bring in a striker, but they can't just bring anyone in. It's got to be a striker who Eddie Howe feels can fit into his style of play, who Eddie Howe thinks he can improve. It's no good just going getting anyone. They've clearly got a list of players. They've worked their way down it. We know the Sesko's of this world are on there, but he chose to go elsewhere. We know players like Liam Delap were considered, but he obviously went elsewhere. Cunha, players like that. So they are working their way through a long list. And we're talking about Strand Larson and Wissa, but apparently there are other targets still being discussed. So, something I think will happen. It's just a case of when. But yeah, it's going to be a really difficult end of the window. And really, I think you're right. They are going to have to pay probably above what they want, because basically selling clubs are going to take advantage.
Yep, I think we have to prepare ourselves for that. Wireman says the chairman only comes for high-profile games. You can tell Eddie knows the meeting with Isak didn't go well by his comments on only concentrating on players that want to play for Newcastle United. And like I said, we don't know what was said in this supposed meeting. I'm sure it will come out. And like I said, I think the fact that they've had these talks, we will get a conclusion. And I don't think this will run on now until the end of the window. I think they've come over. They don't like to be messed around. They like to be clear, which is great. We want that clarity. That's what Eddie Howe will want. And I think one way or the other, we will get this verdict within the next 24 or 48 hours, and it'll allow Newcastle to move on one way or the other.
It's just how that works, though, isn't it? Because if Isak stays, you think he's probably going to have to get a new contract. However, there's a lot of water got to go under the bridge before he's accepted back in the squad. I'd be interested to see what supporters, if anyone wants to drop a message, what it would take for supporters to accept him back in the side. Would be a really interesting one. If he moves on, will Liverpool put up the money to sign him? It's a lot. We know it's a lot. At Newcastle, if they do want 150, then that's quite a way up from what Liverpool's offer was. So I just think I'm not sure it will be 24 hours, 48. I think there's still a lot of mileage to go in it. I would like to think Newcastle will get clarity as soon as possible, and I think that's what they're working towards either way. But if he does stay, then there's got to be a lot of PR done.
I think it's even harder for him to be reintegrated after that performance last night, because what you had was 16 players who were given their all to the badge, to the club, to the supporters. How on earth can he turn up to training, say, a week today and expect to be welcomed back with open arms? Because Bruno has given the perfect performance to how you should play for this club. And Isak has insulted the fans, Eddie Howe, his teammates. And for all the talk of a split within the dressing room, well, it didn't look like any of those players were siding with Alexander Isak last night. So I find it very difficult for Alexander Isak to come back in the short term. I think it'll take well, maybe potentially months. I think you might be looking at kind of October, November time before, if he stays, he's properly reintegrated. But even then, I think that might not even happen, just simply because you've got players in that side who give their all, and he has let them down.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I mean. There's a lot of bridges to be rebuilt, isn't there, between Isak and a number of figures at the club. I think the players being the most integral ones in that, because they're the ones that he's going to be going and training alongside day in, day out. You would understand if they were massively unhappy with what he's done. I think Eddie Howe as well. Again, I will say this: he's managed this situation perfectly. He's been, from minute one, he's been professional. He's been respectful of the club, the supporters, and the player himself. So I think it's it's a really horrible situation, and it is going to take time if he is reintegrated. There's just no easy solution to it. Well, there is, which is he goes for big money, but I don't think that happens at the moment.
Nope. I just want to finish on the comments from Honest Slot, who obviously spoke to Sky last night, among other media outlets, and his comments have stoked up quite a furious reaction from Newcastle United fans and myself as well. I've commented on what he's had to say. He said, I'm not too sure if I saw a football match. It was set piece after set piece, long throws. Didn't have a lot to do with tactics. What on earth is Honest Slot on about? Firstly, you adapt your style of play to the hand you are dealt. Newcastle United went down to 10 men. What on earth was he expecting Newcastle United to do? Pass their way around Liverpool? I mean, you can't even do that with 11 men, let alone 10. So I don't get the complaint at all about the lack of a football match. A football match is not about always having to pass your way into the back of the net or hitting people on the counter. It's about winning the game at the end of the day. And Newcastle United adapted their style to being down to 10 men.
So there's a key word you said there, which is adapted. So this Newcastle side can win games or compete in games in a number of ways. We know they can go direct. We know that they get crosses in the box. The Carabao Cup final showed that, the goal from Isak. There was a cross from out wide from Tino Livramento, headed back by Jake Murphy, and a good finish. They can do that, and they will do that if they have to, but Newcastle can also pass through teams. But you're right, they had to adapt the game last night. They had to play a little bit more direct because they were short in midfield. They went with what I thought was really brave, is they kept two up front, because Alanga and Barnes were kind of playing as almost false nines, weren't they? In around there. So Eddie was brave in that sense. Yeah, if Newcastle tried to pass their way through Liverpool with a short-handed midfield, they would have come unstuck massively. We know, as good as that midfield is, we know they would have come unstuck. So I don't know, it just felt a little bit unnecessary from Slot. I don't really feel like he had to bring that up. But there's been a few little things that he said in recent days where I'm like, I don't think he's. What I will say, he was really complimentary about Eddie Howe. He's really complimentary about the atmosphere in Newcastle as a side. But there's just been a couple of comments recently where I've been like, I'm not sure you're as genuine as people seem to think you are. There was a little comment on Friday. I'm not going to try and quote him exactly, but it was something about Isak. I know Isak won't be playing on Monday, and I was just thought, you don't need to bring that up. Everyone knows he isn't. But no, I think, look, he's a very, very good head coach. He's done a great job at Liverpool in his first season there. But I just felt it was a little bit unnecessary last night. You look at how Eddie Howe's dealt with comments about Liverpool when he's been asked questions about them, and I just think it was just a little bit unnecessary.
It was unnecessary because you've won the game. So what are you complaining about? I really don't understand his issue at all. I mean, if we want to talk about the statistics when it comes to long balls, Newcastle completed 12 out of 51 long balls, while Liverpool completed 15 out of 49. So it's not a massive gap to claim total football that Slot seems to be saying was missing. To me, it just strikes a man who knows he's very, very fortunate to be heading back down the northwest with all 3 points.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess there is that as well. He knows he's had a tough night, and Newcastle were physical throughout the game. There's no doubt about that, but we knew they would be because that's the way they play. And we've always wanted this, when we had difficult times in recent years, there's always been a call for Newcastle to be, high intensity in people's faces and making life difficult. We saw too many times in not too distant past that clubs will come to St James's and just take points off Newcastle freely. Whereas now they come up here knowing it's going to be a battle, and that's kind of what you want, isn't it? We love that when St James's is a bear pit. It's like, you get the fans right on top of you, and the atmosphere's the way it was. So I don't mind that. I think what it does show is that the big clubs, if you want to call them that, in the Premier League, know they're in for a battle when they come up here. Thierry Henry said it after the game that, clubs who come up here now, who are challenging for major honours on a regular basis, know they're not going to be an easy touch. They know Newcastle aren't going to be a soft touch. It's going to be a real fight and a real battle. So I don't mind that. Doesn't bother me.
Yeah. What does he want? Newcastle just to roll
Just
over?
roll over, yeah.
Get your bellies tickled. Ridiculous comment, to say at the very least.
We should end on a positive,
We should go on. I mean, I think we've been positive, Mark.
We are. I just think, I just think what we need to do now is take all that positive momentum gained from last night. You can't forget the result, but put that at the back of your mind for now, and go and attack the Leeds game. Go and attack what is a tough run of fixtures, but do it with confidence that Newcastle have matched the best side in the country last season without the best. Well, could argue without their only striker. Without, for best part of the game, without any striker on the pitch. They put in a performance full of everything that supporters could want. And let's just be positive going forwards, because there's a lot of excitement in this season still. Champions League draws on Thursday. We've got that to look forward to. Carabao Cup draw comes as well. Got that defence to kickstart. So there's a lot of positive, and let's hope that positivity is added to with at least one striker through the door by Monday.
Fingers crossed. We've got YI Man saying, can you ask Mark what happened to Ben Parkinson at the under-21s? I've not seen him on the team sheets for a while.
Yeah, I think Ben's carrying a bit of a knock, I think. I think he's got a year left on his contract. So, yeah, I agree. I mean, he was in around the first team environment, wasn't he? And I think he was down at Bournemouth. He got his first minutes in the first team, and sort of, I think he's one that maybe moved on possibly at some point. You look at someone like Sean Neves, kind of usurped him as that first choice for the under-21s. So it's going to be interesting to see how things develop with the 21s. But yeah, I think Ben is just possibly one that maybe moved on one way or another.
There we go. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Do remember to hit thumbs up on the YouTube channel. Hit subscribe as well. Get into the comments. If you're watching later, I will get back to each and every single one of you. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in live across Facebook, X, and YouTube. If you're listening on the audio platform, do leave us a rating and review. Remember to take advantage of your NORD VPN exclusive discounted offer. No risk with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Stay safe and support the podcast at the same time. For myself and Mark, we will see you guys very soon.